I'm Sophia Reynolds, 29, sitting in a courtroom while my millionaire husband Alexander Bennett publicly destroys what's left of my dignity. 5 years ago, we were madly in love. Now he's telling the judge I tricked him into marriage by hiding my sterility. My hands tremble as Judge Montgomery holds the sealed medical envelope that could change everything. Alexander doesn't know what those records actually show or that his perfectly crafted lie is about to collapse. The truth is far more damaging than he realizes, and when that envelope opens, nothing will ever be the same. Before I tell you how I ended up here, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit subscribe and stay for the moment. This judge changed my life forever. I met Alexander Bennett on what should have been just another workday. As an interior designer building my reputation in Boston, I'd landed a contract decorating the annual charity gala for the Children's Hospital Foundation. While arranging the final centerpieces, a confident voice behind me said, "Those are stunning. You have an exceptional eye." When I turned, I faced the most handsome man I'd ever seen in person. Tall, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes, wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Thank you," I replied professionally. "I'm Sophia Reynolds, the designer." "Alexander Bennett," he said, extending his hand. "I'm on the foundation board." I knew the Bennett name immediately. Everyone in Boston did. The family owned half the premium real estate in the city with developments across the East Coast. They were old money made new again through Alexander's business expansion. What I didn't expect was for him to stay by the table asking thoughtful questions about my design choices. When the event coordinator needed me elsewhere, I thought that would be it. Instead, Alexander found me later with 2 champagne glasses. "I'd love to hear more about your design philosophy," he said, offering me a drink. "Perhaps over dinner sometime." Our first date happened 2 days later at an exclusive restaurant overlooking the harbor. I wore my only designer dress purchased secondhand. Alexander arrived with a small arrangement of orchids he'd noticed them in my gala designs and remembered when I mentioned they were my favorite. That thoughtfulness characterized our whirlwind romance. Weekend trips to New York for Broadway shows, sailing along the coast on his family's yacht. Each date more extravagant than the last, yet Alexander always made me feel like the main attraction, not the activities. "You're different," he told me one evening as we watched the sunset from his penthouse. "Most women I meet care about what I can give them. You care about who I am." I did care. Despite his wealth, Alexander seemed grounded. He listened when I talked about my middle-class upbringing in Connecticut, how I'd worked through college waitressing and doing small design jobs, how my parents had sacrificed to support my dreams. 6 months into dating, Alexander proposed during a private dinner on the rooftop garden I'd helped him design. With the Boston skyline twinkling behind us and a 3-carat diamond ring in his hand, he promised to cherish me forever. I said yes without hesitation. Meeting his family came next. Margaret Bennett welcomed me with practiced warmth at their Beacon Hill mansion. "Alexander speaks so highly of you," she said, kissing my cheek. "We're delighted he's found someone special." His father, Gregory's reception felt colder. He evaluated me over his whiskey glass, asking pointed questions about my family background and career ambitions. "The Bennett name carries expectations," he informed me during a moment alone. "I hope you understand what you're stepping into." The wedding planning quickly escalated beyond anything I'd imagined. Margaret hired Boston's premier wedding planner, and my simple ideas morphed into an extravaganza for 400 guests, most of whom I'd never met. Alexander assured me it was necessary for family connections, so I compromised on almost everything except my dress. We married in the historic Trinity Church, followed by a reception at the Bennett estate. As Alexander and I danced our first dance, he whispered, "Thank you for making me the happiest man alive." The honeymoon took us through the Mediterranean for 3 weeks, walking hand in hand through Greek villages, sailing off the Italian coast, and sharing candlelit dinners in France. It felt like a dream I'd never wake from. Upon our return, we moved into a townhouse Alexander had purchased in Back Bay. Though it came fully furnished, he encouraged me to redecorate. "Make it ours," he said. "This is your canvas." I threw myself into transforming the space, creating a home that blended his sophisticated taste with warmer elements. My design business continued growing with Alexander, occasionally recommending me to his associates. "I'm proud of you," he'd say when I secured major projects. "Your talent deserves recognition." Our first anniversary arrived with Alexander surprising me with a weekend in Montreal where we'd talked about visiting. As we clinked champagne glasses in our hotel suite, he toasted to many more years of building our life together. "What do you see in those years ahead?" I asked, curious about his long-term vision. "Success travel, perhaps. A family someday," he answered smoothly. "When the time is right." I nodded, appreciating his lack of pressure. We'd briefly discussed children before marriage, both agreeing we wanted them eventually. At 27, with my career gaining momentum, I felt grateful for his patience. Looking back, I should have noticed subtle signs even then. How he tensed slightly at industry events when people asked what I did. How his mother increasingly mentioned friends' grandchildren during our monthly family dinners. How Alexander's compliments about my work often ended with, "though you might want to slow down eventually." But wrapped in the cocoon of apparent perfect love, I missed the warning signs. I believed I'd found my forever partner who valued me completely, my ambitions, my independence, my dreams alongside his. The first fractures in that belief were still months away, invisible beneath the gleaming surface of our seemingly charmed life. The shift happened so gradually I almost didn't notice. Around 18 months into our marriage, Alexander's casual mentions of starting a family someday became more frequent, more pointed. What had been theoretical future plans suddenly featured in present-tense conversations. The Morrison estate would be perfect for raising children, he commented while reviewing a potential investment property. 3 acres, excellent school district. At a dinner celebrating my successful design of a boutique hotel lobby, he raised his glass to Sophia's talent, and hopefully to her taking on her most important design project soon, our nursery. His mother, Margaret, became increasingly obvious. During our monthly family dinners, she'd direct the conversation toward her friends' grandchildren, showing me photos of designer nurseries. "Wouldn't these be perfect for your touch, Sophia?" I always imagined. At least 4 grandchildren running around this house. Initially, I deflected with humor. "Let us enjoy being newlyweds a little longer," I'd say, or, "My business is my baby right now." Alexander would smile publicly, but later question me in private. "You do still want children, right? You said you did before we married." "Of course I do," I assured him. "Just not quite yet. I have the Williams hotel chain contract finalizing, and they're talking about multiple locations. It could really establish my brand nationally." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Some opportunities are time-sensitive, Sophia. Your biological clock doesn't care about hotel chains." I was 28, hardly approaching reproductive crisis. But Alexander, at 34, spoke with increasing urgency about legacy and family planning. One evening after a particularly uncomfortable family dinner where his father had commented that Bennetts have always prioritized family over fleeting career achievements, Alexander confronted me in our bedroom. "When exactly do you plan to be ready?" he asked, loosening his tie with sharp movements. "It's been over a year of 'not yet' and 'soon.' What are you waiting for?" "I thought we were partners making decisions together," I replied, stunned by his tone. "My career is at a critical point. Another year would make such a difference." "And I've supported that career completely," he countered. "I've introduced you to clients, praised your work to everyone we know. I've given you everything, Sophia. Is it so unreasonable to want a family with my wife?" The way he framed it, as though my career success was his gift rather than my achievement, as though I was selfishly withholding children he deserved, left me disoriented. Was I being unreasonable? "Of course not," I finally said. "I want that too. Maybe we could start trying in 6 months after the hotel project." He softened, immediately crossing the room to embrace me. "Thank you, sweetheart. You'll be an amazing mother. And you don't have to give up your work completely, just scale back to the most interesting projects." That night was the first time I lay awake, wondering if Alexander and I wanted the same life after all. But I pushed the doubts away, telling myself compromise was part of marriage. 6 months later, true to my word, I told Alexander I was ready to try for a baby. His entire demeanor transformed, the pressure lifted, replaced by enthusiastic planning. He bought pregnancy books, downloaded fertility tracking apps to my phone, and scheduled what he called optimal intimacy times on our shared calendar. What had once been spontaneous and passionate became mechanical. Alexander checked my temperature every morning, asked about cervical mucus changes, and texted midday reminders about ovulation windows. Sex transformed from connection to obligation, always with the reminder, this could be the time we make our baby. After 3 months without pregnancy, Alexander's enthusiasm hardened into concern. After 6, it became impatience. Maybe we should see a specialist, he suggested one morning, scrolling through his phone. Dr. Kensington is supposedly the best fertility expert in Boston. Several board members' wives have used him. It's only been 6 months, I protested. Everything I've read says it's normal to take up to a year. There's no reason to wait if there might be an issue, he countered. I've already made an appointment for next Tuesday. That he'd scheduled a medical appointment without consulting me first felt like a boundary violation, but his concerned expression made it difficult to object. We just want to make sure everything's optimal, he added, kissing my forehead. The appointment had been made for both of us, which initially reassured me. Dr. Kensington was professional and thorough, recommending standard fertility testing for each of us to establish a baseline. Most couples conceive within a year, he explained. But there's no harm in checking that everything's functioning properly. As we left the clinic, Alexander squeezed my hand. See? Just routine. Nothing to worry about. But that night, I overheard him on the phone with his father. Yes, we're getting tested. Of course, I insisted. Well, she's always been career-focused. Perhaps there's a connection. I know the Bennett line has never had fertility issues. The implication was clear. If there was a problem, it must be with me. The tests would surely confirm what generations of prolific Bennett reproduction had proven any fertility issue couldn't possibly come from his side. In bed that night, Alexander pulled me close. It's going to be fine, he murmured into my hair. And if there is something wrong, we'll fix it. Whatever it takes to have our family. I nodded against his chest, but a new worry had taken root. For the first time, I wondered what would happen if I couldn't give Alexander the children he so clearly expected. Would he still want me? Would the life we'd built together still be enough? The Alexander who had once loved me for myself seemed to be transforming into someone who measured my value by my reproductive potential. As I drifted into uneasy sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that our marriage was being reduced to a means to an end, and that end was a Bennett heir, not our happiness together. The sterile walls of Dr. Mercer's office seemed fitting for the cold dread settling in my stomach. We'd switched from Dr. Kensington after Alexander decided we needed a more aggressive approach. Dr. Linda Mercer had a reputation for achieving pregnancies in challenging cases, and Alexander wouldn't settle for anything less than the best. We'll run comprehensive panels on both of you, Dr. Mercer explained, her voice professionally neutral. Hormone levels, genetic screening, physical examinations. For Mrs. Bennett, we'll check ovarian reserve and tubal patency. For Mr. Bennett, we'll analyze sperm count morphology and motility. Alexander nodded confidently. Excellent. How quickly can we complete these tests? We can finish preliminary testing within 2 weeks, she replied. I suggest you both complete the labs before your individual consultations. The testing process was intrusive and uncomfortable, but I reminded myself of the potential reward understanding what might be preventing pregnancy and addressing it. Alexander accompanied me to my appointments, but scheduled his own when I had design consultations I couldn't miss. 2 weeks later, Dr. Mercer called me in alone for my results. I was surprised Alexander wasn't required to attend, but he had a business meeting he couldn't reschedule. Is something wrong with me? I asked immediately upon sitting down. Dr. Mercer's expression remained carefully neutral. Your results show completely normal fertility markers, Mrs. Bennett. Your hormone levels, ovarian reserve, and reproductive structures are all within optimal ranges. Relief washed through me, followed immediately by confusion. Then why haven't I conceived? Dr. Mercer hesitated, glancing down at another file on her desk. Mrs. Bennett, Sophia, I've also received Mr. Bennett's test results. Something in her tone made my heart sink. And patient confidentiality prevents me from sharing specific details without his permission, she began carefully. However, I can tell you that conceiving naturally might be challenging based on the complete picture I'm seeing. Are you saying the issue is with Alexander? I asked, trying to process this unexpected turn. What I'm saying is that the primary fertility challenge doesn't appear to be on your side, she replied diplomatically. Mr. Bennett has a scheduled consultation tomorrow to discuss his results in detail. I left the office in a daze, unsure how to feel. Part of me felt vindicated that I wasn't defective, as Alexander had increasingly implied. Another part dreaded Alexander's reaction to news that contradicted his family's proud fertility history. That evening, I debated whether to mention my appointment. Before I could decide, Alexander announced he'd be working late and not to wait up. He returned after midnight, smelling of expensive scotch. The next day, he attended his appointment without mentioning it. When he returned home, his expression was thunderous. "What did Dr. Mercer tell you?" I asked cautiously. "That we should both begin treatments," he snapped. "Apparently my sperm motility isn't optimal, though everything else is fine. She's probably exaggerating the issue to sell more services." "My results came back normal," I said quietly. He gave me a skeptical look. "No one's perfectly fertile, Sophia. Dr. Mercer recommended you start hormone treatments to create the most receptive environment. We both need to optimize." I was confused. "But if your motility is the primary?" "It's not the primary anything," he interrupted sharply. "It's a minor issue that men in high-stress executive positions sometimes experience. Temporary and treatable. The important thing is that we both do whatever it takes." The treatments began immediately. For Alexander, vitamins and lifestyle modifications. For me, despite my normal results, hormone injections that left my stomach bruised and my emotions chaotic. When I expressed concern about the side effects to Dr. Mercer during a follow-up appointment, she seemed troubled. "These hormone protocols are usually reserved for women with diminished ovarian function," she said, reviewing my chart. "Given your normal testing, this aggressive approach seems unnecessary." "Alexander said you recommended it," I replied, confused. Dr. Mercer's expression tightened. "I suggested minimal intervention for you with the primary focus on addressing Mr. Bennett's motility issues. Let me speak with him to clarify the treatment plan." Whatever conversation occurred between them, Alexander returned from his next appointment, insisting we continue the current protocol. Dr. Mercer agrees this gives us the best odds, he claimed. 6 more months passed without conception. Alexander's frustration grew visibly, especially during family gatherings, where his mother would ask for updates with poorly concealed disappointment. "Perhaps you're too focused on work," his father suggested, during one particularly tense dinner. "Bennett women have traditionally dedicated themselves to family building. Your grandmother had 5 children, Margaret had 3. Gregory Margaret chided softly, though she didn't actually contradict him. "I'm just saying priorities matter," he continued. "Alexander runs a $100 million company and still makes time for family planning. Perhaps Sophia could adjust her schedule." Alexander didn't defend me. Instead, he studied his wine glass and said, "We're exploring all possibilities." That night, I discovered Alexander had been researching my medical history without my knowledge. His laptop, left open when he took a call, displayed my health insurance claims from before our marriage. "What are you doing?" I confronted him when he returned. "Trying to understand what you might be hiding," he replied without shame. "There must be something in your history explaining why you're not conceiving." "Dr. Mercer said I'm perfectly fertile," I exclaimed. "She told me the issue is with your sperm motility." His face darkened. "She told you that specifically?" Yes, and yet I'm the one being pumped full of unnecessary hormones while you take vitamins. So this is my fault, he demanded, voice dangerously quiet. You're blaming me. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm saying we need to focus treatment where the actual issue is, not pretend it's me when the tests show otherwise. The argument escalated until Alexander stormed out, returning hours later reeking of alcohol. The next morning, he acted as though nothing had happened, calmly informing me he'd scheduled appointments with a different fertility specialist. I don't trust Dr. Mercer's assessment, he explained. We need a second opinion. I felt increasingly trapped in a narrative Alexander was constructing, one where my body was defective, where his family line was impeccable, where my career was an impediment to fulfilling my true purpose as a Bennett wife. When I shared my concerns with my best friend Rachel over coffee, her paralegal training kicked in. This sounds like gaslighting, Soph, she said seriously. He's trying to make you doubt your own medical results. He's just desperate for children, I defended weakly. No, Rachel insisted. He's desperate to not be the one with a fertility issue. There's a difference. And going through your medical history without permission, that's controlling behavior. I brushed off her concerns, but they lingered. That evening, I received a call from Nurse Kelly at Dr. Mercer's office. Mrs. Bennett, Dr. Mercer asked me to confirm your appointment tomorrow at 2 p.m. I don't have an appointment scheduled, I replied, confused. That's odd. Your husband called to arrange it. He was quite insistent about seeing Dr. Mercer alone first to discuss treatment adjustments before you arrived. Something about this felt wrong. I'll need to check with my husband and call back, I said carefully. That night at the Bennett family dinner, I watched Alexander interact with his parents with new eyes. His constant deference to his father. His mother's subtle reinforcement of family expectations. The weight of the Bennett legacy pressing down on all of us. When his mother brought up a cousin's new baby and asked pointedly when we'd have good news, Alexander's response chilled me to the bone. We're working through some unforeseen complications, he said, giving me a look that placed all blame squarely on my shoulders. Some situations aren't as straightforward as they initially appear. In that moment, I realized I was married to a man who would rather destroy my self-worth than admit to any imperfection himself. And as his father nodded sympathetically and his mother patted my hand with practiced concern, I understood that in the Bennett family, appearances would always matter more than truth. The revelation wasn't just about our fertility struggles, it was about the foundation of lies and manipulation our marriage had been built upon. And for the first time, I began to wonder if this was a foundation worth saving. The first sign of Alexander's affair was so obvious, I almost laughed. A long blonde hair on his suit jacket, straight and silky, nothing like my dark curls. When confronted, he didn't even try to deny it. "What did you expect, Sophia?" he said, loosening his tie with the practiced ease of someone unburdening themselves. 2 years of marriage, and no child. My father reminds me weekly about the Bennett legacy dying with me. So this is my fault. My voice sounded strange, even to my own ears, hollow yet razor sharp. You knew how important family was to me. He poured himself a scotch, not offering me one. To us. The Bennetts have a 3-century lineage in Boston. Did you think I would let that end because you're sterile? The word hit like a physical blow. I am not sterile. Dr. Mercer confirmed my fertility is normal. You're the one with motility issues. His laugh was cruel. Is that what you need to believe? Every Bennett man has fathered multiple children? The problem isn't with me. Then why are you sleeping with someone else, trying for a second opinion? His expression confirmed. My sarcastic guess had hit the mark. Catherine understands the importance of family. She's not career-obsessed. I felt sick. How long? 6 months. He sipped his drink, watching me over the rim. Her father's on the hospital board with me. She's 25 from good stock. Fertile stock. The casual cruelty was breathtaking. This wasn't the man I'd married, or perhaps it was finally revealed without pretense. Does everyone know? I asked, thinking of the pitying looks at recent social events. I've been discreet, he replied. Though I've had to explain our situation to certain people. That you unfortunately can't have children. That's a lie. I slammed my hand on the counter. You know that's a lie. Is it I have the medical records proving it? What medical records mine are normal? Alexander's smile chilled me. Records can be interpreted many ways, Sophia. Dr. Kensington was very understanding of my situation. The implication was clear. Alexander had somehow manipulated my medical information. I needed to confirm the truth immediately. The next morning, I called Dr. Mercer's office and scheduled an urgent appointment, citing concerns about my treatment protocol. When I arrived, her expression was grave. Mrs. Bennett, I'm glad you called. There's something troubling I need to discuss with you. My stomach dropped. What is it? Your husband requested copies of both your medical records last week. When my nurse provided them, he became agitated that they didn't show what he expected. She hesitated. He then asked if I could correct certain findings to indicate female factor infertility rather than male factor. The confirmation of Alexander's deception still stunned me. He wanted you to falsify medical records. Yes. When I refused, he became threatening, mentioning his connections to the hospital board and my practice's lease in the medical building his family owns. Dr. Mercer's professional demeanor cracked slightly. I've been practicing medicine for 20 years, Mrs. Bennett. I don't appreciate being intimidated. I'm so sorry, I whispered, mortified by my husband's behavior. Don't be. But you should know he's consulted with Dr. Kensington, who has a reputation for being more accommodating to influential patients. Everything clicked into place. He's creating a false narrative that I'm infertile. It appears so. Dr. Mercer handed me a folder. These are certified copies of your actual test results and my clinical notes. I suggest you keep them somewhere safe. I thanked her and left in a daze, the folder clutched to my chest like a shield. At home, I went straight to our shared office to secure the documents in my personal files, only to discover Alexander had emptied our joint checking account. Nearly $300,000 gone. When confronted that evening, Alexander didn't bother denying it. Financial restructuring, he called it casually. Given the circumstances. What circumstances, I demanded. Our impending separation, of course. He looked almost bored. You didn't think we'd continue this charade indefinitely, did you? My world tilted sideways. You're divorcing me. It's the sensible solution. You can't give me children. I need someone who can. Based on medical lies you're creating, I felt hysteria building. The fertility issue is yours, not mine. His expression darkened. Be very careful, Sophia. You signed an ironclad prenup. If you cooperate with a discreet, amicable separation citing irreconcilable differences, you'll receive the settlement outlined. If you contest it, or create public embarrassment for the Bennett name, he shrugged, you'll leave with nothing. You can't just rewrite medical reality. I can do whatever I want, he shouted, mask finally slipping. I'm a Bennett. My family built half this city while yours was serving food in diners. Who do you think people will believe? As he loomed over me, red-faced and trembling with rage, I finally saw the real Alexander Bennett, entitled Ruthless, willing to destroy anyone who challenged the narrative he'd constructed. If you leave this marriage, he continued, voice deadly, quiet, I'll ensure you never work in design again. Not in Boston, not anywhere my family has connections, which is everywhere that matters. Your reputation, your career, your dreams, I gave them to you, and I can take them away. I retreated to the guest bedroom that night, locking the door. While Alexander slept in our marital bed, likely dreaming of his future with fertile Catherine, I researched divorce attorneys on my laptop. Most prominent Boston firms would have conflicts due to Bennett business connections, but I found Thomas Wright, a respected divorce attorney known for taking on powerful opponents. The next morning, I called Rachel from a coffee shop 3 blocks from our home. I need your help, I told her, voice breaking. Alexander's having an affair emptied our accounts and is trying to divorce me using falsified medical records claiming I'm infertile. Within hours, Rachel had helped me secure an emergency appointment with Thomas Wright, who listened gravely to my situation. The Bennetts are formidable opponents, he acknowledged. But falsifying medical records is serious misconduct. We need to move quickly to protect your interests. While Alexander was at a board meeting, Rachel helped me gather essential documents from our home financial records, my original medical files, evidence of my business earnings, personal items with sentimental value. I left my wedding ring on the dresser with a note, "I know the truth. So will everyone else if necessary." That evening, my phone exploded with messages from Alexander, each more threatening than the last. "You've made a catastrophic mistake. Return home immediately if you want any hope of a settlement. You have no idea who you're messing with." The final message sent chills down my spine. "I've had you investigated for months. I know every secret, every weakness, every vulnerability. Stand down now or I'll destroy everything you care about." As I curled up on Rachel's sofa bed that night, I wondered how I'd missed the warning signs of Alexander's true nature. But the little girl from Connecticut who'd worked her way through design school, who'd believed in a fairy tale romance with a wealthy prince, was gone now. In her place was a woman who understood that the truth was her only weapon against a man who believed money could buy anything, even alternate realities. And I was absolutely determined to use it. Alexander discovered I'd moved out while on a 3-day business trip to New York. I'd timed my departure carefully, taking only what I absolutely needed: clothes, personal documents, irreplaceable mementos, and my design portfolios. Rachel's spare bedroom became my sanctuary, while Thomas Wright prepared for what he warned would be the legal fight of your life. Alexander's first reaction came via text. "Playing hardball unwise. Come home and we'll discuss a reasonable settlement." When I didn't respond, his messages escalated. "You signed a prenup. You'll get nothing. Then your design firm, lease owned by Bennett Properties. Better find a new office." By evening, he'd switched to voicemails, his controlled facade crumbling with each one. "This is absolutely ridiculous, Sophia. You're embarrassing yourself and me. My father's legal team will crush your no-name lawyer. Be smart about this." The final message, left near midnight, revealed the Alexander I now knew existed beneath the charming exterior. "You ungrateful bitch. I made you. Nobody knew Sophia Reynolds before me. When I'm done, nobody will hire you to design a doghouse." Thomas heard the messages and added them to our evidence file. "His anger works in our favor," he explained. "Angry people make mistakes." The first mistake came when Alexander canceled my company credit cards without notice, leaving me unable to purchase materials for ongoing client projects. The second was freezing our joint personal account, which contained mostly my business earnings from the previous quarter. "Financial abuse," Thomas noted calmly. "Judges don't look kindly on this." The third mistake happened 3 days later when I tried accessing my design firm's cloud storage and found myself locked out. Alexander had somehow gained administrator access through a mutual contact in IT and restricted my entry to my own company's files. "Criminal computer fraud," Thomas added to our growing list. "We're building quite a case." But Alexander was building his own case. A week after I left, Rachel forwarded me an email from a mutual acquaintance. "Is it true what Alexander is saying about Sophia, that she hid fertility problems before marriage? Everyone's talking about it. So sad." The rumors were spreading systematically through Boston's social circles. At first subtle, then increasingly explicit, Sophia Bennett had tricked Alexander into marriage, knowing she couldn't have children. Sophia had refused fertility treatments. Sophia had prioritized her career over her husband's desperate desire for a family. The damage extended beyond social humiliation. My biggest client, a luxury hotel chain, suddenly put our contract under review. 2 wealthy homeowners canceled renovation projects. A magazine feature on my design work was mysteriously pulled. "He's using his connections to destroy me professionally," I told Thomas during our weekly meeting, showing him the cancellation emails. "Document everything," he advised. "This demonstrates malice and intent to harm." While Alexander waged his whisper campaign, his attorney James Parker delivered the first settlement offer. I would receive $50,000 and waive all other claims if I signed papers admitting I had withheld material information about fertility issues prior to marriage. He wants me to admit to a lie just to save his ego, I said, tossing the papers aside. Exactly, Thomas agreed. He's trying to create a narrative that protects the Bennett name while destroying yours. We're rejecting this offer and countering with our own. Our counter-demand requested a fair division of marital assets, compensation for career damages, and a public retraction of false statements Alexander had made about my fertility. Alexander's response came via a formal letter threatening to sue me for fraud. Mrs. Bennett knowingly entered into marriage under false pretenses, concealing medical conditions that prevented fulfilling a fundamental marital expectation. That night, I received an unexpected call from Nurse Kelly at Dr. Mercer's fertility clinic. Mrs. Bennett, I shouldn't be calling you, she began nervously. But I can't stay silent. Your husband came to the clinic yesterday demanding alterations to your medical records. My heart raced. What happened? Dr. Mercer refused, of course. He became enraged, threatening her medical license and our clinic's lease. He said he had recordings of Dr. Mercer admitting to prescription irregularities that could ruin her. That's a lie, I said automatically. We know, Kelly replied. But he was so convincing. Dr. Mercer is consulting her attorney, but I thought you should know. I also heard him on his phone in the hallway telling someone named James to file immediately and leak the story to Diane at the Globe. James, his attorney. Alexander was planning to file divorce papers and simultaneously plant a story in the Boston Globe. He was going nuclear. I called Thomas immediately, who initiated emergency filing procedures of our own. We need to get ahead of his narrative, he explained. I have a contact at the Herald. If he's going to the press, we need our side represented too. That night I couldn't sleep imagining the public humiliation Alexander was orchestrating. My phone buzzed with a text from a blocked number, final warning. Sign the settlement by noon tomorrow or face the consequences. Morning brought the realization that Alexander had hired someone to follow me. A black sedan had been parked across from Rachel's apartment building all night, its driver photographing everyone entering or leaving. When Rachel left for work, the car followed her. He's trying to intimidate us, Thomas said when I called panicking. Document the vehicle, but don't approach it. I'm filing for a temporary restraining order today. Before he could, Alexander's attorney filed divorce papers, citing fraud and misrepresentation. Within hours, as Nurse Kelly had warned, the story appeared in the Boston Globe Society column, Bennett heir seeks divorce after fertility deception. The article quoted sources close to the family claiming I had hidden known fertility issues before our marriage, then refused appropriate medical treatments after. It described Alexander as devastated, but looking forward to rebuilding with someone honest. My phone exploded with messages from acquaintances, clients, and even my parents who'd learned about my divorce from the newspaper rather than from me. The public humiliation was exactly what Alexander had threatened, calculated to make me surrender. Instead, I called Dr. Mercer. They're printing lies about my medical condition. Can you help? Her response was cautious. Patient confidentiality works both ways, Mrs. Bennett. I cannot publicly discuss your records without authorization. I'm giving you authorization, I said desperately. Please, he's destroying my reputation and career with these lies. After consulting her attorney, Dr. Mercer agreed to provide a carefully worded affidavit stating that my fertility testing showed no abnormalities or concerns, and that any representation to the contrary would be medically inaccurate. Thomas filed this with our counter-petition for divorce, citing Alexander's pattern of emotional abuse, financial control, marital infidelity, and deliberate career sabotage. The evening the counter-petition was filed, Alexander showed up at Rachel's apartment building demanding to see me. When the doorman refused him entry, he created a scene in the lobby, shouting that I was mentally unstable and needed help. Police were called and the incident report documenting Alexander's aggressive behavior and the doorman's statement that he appeared intoxicated became another piece of evidence in our growing file. That night, Alexander sent a final text. "You've chosen war over reason. Remember, I warned you." The next morning, I discovered what he meant. Overnight, someone had accessed my professional social media accounts and design website, replacing portfolio images with blank pages and client testimonials with the word fraud repeated over and over. When I tried logging in to fix the damage, I found all passwords changed and recovery emails rerouted. Simultaneously, emails were sent from my professional account to every client in my database. Due to personal issues, I am unable to complete current projects. Please seek alternative design services immediately. Years of professional reputation building destroyed in minutes by someone with technical skills and access to my information. I collapsed on Rachel's floor, hyperventilating as she tried comforting me. "He's trying to break you," she said, holding my shoulders. "Don't let him." Through tears, I found my resolve hardening. Alexander had taken everything: my home, my reputation, my career opportunities. The only thing I had left was the truth. And if I had to burn down my entire life to expose his lies, I would. I called Thomas. "I want to go forward with every legal action possible. No settlement discussions, no private resolutions. I want this in open court." Thomas was silent for a moment. "The Bennetts rarely lose Sophia. They have resources we can't match." "But they don't have the truth," I replied. "And neither wealth nor the Bennett name can change medical reality." "Then we'll need one more critical piece," Thomas said thoughtfully. "We need Dr. Mercer's complete testimony about Alexander's demand to falsify records." "She's afraid of him," I reminded him. "The Bennetts own her clinic's building." "Everyone has a breaking point," Thomas replied. "Even doctors afraid of landlord retaliation. Let me see what I can do." That afternoon, Nurse Kelly called again. "Dr. Mercer wants to meet you off-site after hours. She's received a subpoena from your husband's attorney demanding all your records." "Is she going to comply?" I asked, heart sinking. "That's why she wants to meet you. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. at the Riverside Coffee Shop. Come alone." As I hung up, I wondered if this meeting might be my last chance to obtain the evidence needed to counter Alexander's destructive lies. With my career in tatters, my reputation smeared, and my financial resources dwindling, Dr. Mercer's complete medical testimony represented my only hope of exposing the truth. And truth I had learned the hard way was the one thing Alexander Bennett feared most. The Boston family court building loomed before me, its stone facade cold and imposing in the morning light. Rachel squeezed my hand reassuringly as Thomas Wright reviewed final details before we entered. "Remember, the Bennetts have likely influenced people throughout the courthouse," he cautioned. "Staff, clerks, possibly even court officers. Show nothing but calm dignity regardless of what happens." Inside, Alexander and his attorney, James Parker, were already seated at their table, both in impeccably tailored suits that probably cost more than my entire current wardrobe. Alexander didn't acknowledge my presence, but I felt his gaze tracking me as we took our places. Judge Evelyn Montgomery entered the courtroom, a slender woman in her 60s with shrewd eyes that seemed to assess everything at once. Her reputation for fairness gave me hope, though Thomas had warned that even judges weren't immune to the Bennett influence. "This is a preliminary hearing in the divorce petition of Bennett versus Bennett," she began reviewing the filings before her. "I see competing petitions with serious allegations on both sides. Mr. Parker, as the original petitioner, you may begin." James Parker rose smoothly. "Thank you, Your Honor. This case, while unfortunate, is straightforward. Mr. Bennett entered into marriage with the respondent under the mutual understanding that they would build a family together. After 2 years of marriage, Mr. Bennett discovered that his wife had concealed known fertility issues that prevent her from having children." "Objection," Thomas interrupted. "Counsel is presenting disputed allegations as established fact." "Sustained," Judge Montgomery replied. "Mr. Parker, please stick to procedural matters for now. You'll have opportunity to present your case shortly. Parker nodded deferentially. Of course, Your Honor. The petitioner seeks dissolution based on fraud and misrepresentation material to the marital contract. We've submitted the prenuptial agreement signed by both parties, which clearly outlines the settlement terms in such circumstances. Judge Montgomery reviewed the document. I see the prenuptial agreement requires full disclosure of all material facts prior to marriage. Mr. Right. I assume your client disputes the allegation of non-disclosure. Emphatically, Your Honor, Thomas replied. Not only did my client disclose all relevant medical information before marriage, but evidence will show that Mr. Bennett has deliberately fabricated claims about Mrs. Bennett's fertility to avoid financial obligations and distract from his own marital misconduct. The judge's expression remained neutral. Serious allegations on both sides. Let's proceed with opening statements, then preliminary testimony, to determine if emergency financial relief is warranted while this case proceeds. Parker's opening painted Alexander as a devoted husband, betrayed by a social climbing wife who trapped him in marriage, knowing she couldn't fulfill his dream of building a family. Mr. Bennett comes from a long-established Boston family where lineage and legacy are paramount, Parker explained. The respondent was well aware of these values, yet concealed medical information that directly impacted this fundamental aspect of marriage. He called their first witness, Margaret Bennett, Alexander's mother, who testified tearfully about how Alexander had always longed for children and how I had seemed to string him along with promises of starting a family someday. She always had an excuse, Margaret claimed. Her career needed more time. She wanted to travel first, always something. Alexander was so patient, supporting her design business, introducing her to his connections. Then when they finally started trying, nothing happened. Did Mrs. Bennett ever admit to fertility issues? Parker asked. Not directly, but she must have known. The Bennetts have never had fertility problems. Gregory and I conceived Alexander within 2 months of marriage. It was obviously her issue, yet she refused appropriate treatments, prioritizing her career over Alexander's happiness. Thomas's cross-examination was pointed. Mrs. Bennett, were you present at any of your daughter-in-law's medical appointments? No, but Alexander told me. So you have no first-hand knowledge of her medical condition? I know my son wouldn't lie, Margaret replied stiffly. Are you aware your son has been romantically involved with another woman for at least 6 months while still married to my client? Parker objected immediately. Irrelevant and inflammatory. It goes to credibility and motive, Your Honor, Thomas countered. I'll allow it, Judge Montgomery ruled. The witness may answer. Margaret's composure slipped. Alexander has been under tremendous strain. If he sought comfort elsewhere, perhaps it's understandable given the circumstances. Next came Bradley Wilson, a business associate of Alexander's, who testified about a conversation at a charity event. Alexander confided that Sophia had hidden her infertility from him. He was devastated, said she'd refused treatments that might help. The poor man was at his wits' end. Thomas's cross-examination established that this conversation occurred after I had moved out, and that Wilson had significant business interests with Bennett Properties. Alexander's assistant, Caroline, testified about scheduling doctor appointments and overhearing arguments about fertility treatments. Mrs. Bennett always seemed reluctant about the appointments. Mr. Bennett was so dedicated to having a family, constantly researching treatments and specialists. When Parker concluded his initial witness presentations, Thomas called me to testify. I took the stand, acutely aware of Alexander's cold stare. Mrs. Bennett, Thomas began, did you at any time before your marriage conceal fertility issues from your husband? Absolutely not, I answered clearly. I had no reason to believe I had fertility issues. We'd discussed wanting children someday, but with no specific timeline. When did you begin actively trying to conceive? About 2 years into our marriage. Alexander suddenly became intensely focused on having children immediately. After 6 months without pregnancy, he insisted on fertility testing for both of us. And what were the results of those tests? My results were completely normal across all metrics. Alexander was diagnosed with low sperm motility, which was the primary factor affecting our chances of natural conception. Parker objected vigorously. Your Honor, the petitioner contests this characterization of medical findings. Do you have medical records to support your testimony? Judge Montgomery asked me directly. Yes, Your Honor, I replied. My fertility specialist, Dr. Linda Mercer, provided certified copies of my test results showing normal fertility markers, as well as documentation of Mr. Bennett's condition. I explained how Alexander had refused to accept his diagnosis, how he'd pressured me to undergo unnecessary hormone treatments, despite my normal test results, and how he'd eventually asked Dr. Mercer to falsify medical records. After I discovered his affair and confronted him, he admitted he'd been telling people I was infertile or sterile, directly contradicting our actual medical testing. Thomas introduced financial records showing how Alexander had systematically cut off my access to accounts, canceled my credit cards, and interfered with my business. Mrs. Bennett, did your husband make threats regarding your design career? Yes. He explicitly threatened to destroy my business if I contested the divorce or disputed his narrative about my fertility. I described the website hacking, the client cancellations, and the professional sabotage I'd experienced. During cross-examination, Parker tried to portray me as a gold digger who'd married Alexander for his connections and wealth. Isn't it true your design business experienced remarkable growth after your marriage to Mr. Bennett? My business grew because of my work and talent, I replied firmly. Alexander made introductions, yes, but I earned those clients through my skills. And now that the marriage has failed, you're seeking to extract maximum financial benefit despite the clear terms of the prenuptial agreement you signed. I'm seeking fair treatment and the truth. The prenup specified full disclosure of all material facts. Alexander is the one who concealed and distorted medical facts, not me. After my testimony, Thomas called Rachel, who described witnessing Alexander's controlling behavior and my deteriorating emotional state during the marriage. She testified about helping me move out and the surveillance that followed, including the car that had tracked her movements. When court recessed for lunch, Thomas seemed cautiously optimistic. Judge Montgomery is paying close attention. She's taking extensive notes during testimony about the medical records. What about Dr. Mercer? I asked. Is she coming? She's scheduled for tomorrow, Thomas confirmed. Her testimony will be crucial. When court resumed, Alexander took the stand, projecting the perfect image of a wounded husband in an expertly tailored navy suit, with a subtle family crest on his cufflinks. I loved Sophia deeply, he began, voice carefully modulated to convey controlled emotion. When we discussed having children before marriage, she assured me she wanted a family as much as I did. He described our fertility struggles from his perspective, how devastated he'd been when months of trying produced no pregnancy, how he'd spared no expense pursuing treatments. When Dr. Kensington identified female fertility factors as the primary issue, Sophia became defensive, blaming me instead. She grew increasingly resistant to treatments, prioritizing design projects over appointment schedules. The deliberate lies made my blood boil, but Thomas had warned me to maintain a neutral expression regardless of provocation. I never wanted our private medical issues made public, Alexander continued, but Sophia's false accusations have forced me to defend myself. The truth is, she misrepresented herself before our marriage on a matter she knew was fundamentally important to me. During Thomas's cross-examination, Alexander maintained his composed facade, never directly answering questions about his affair with Catherine or the specific findings of our fertility testing. The medical details are complex, he deflected. Different specialists had different interpretations. What's undeniable is that after 2 years of marriage and extensive fertility treatments, my wife failed to conceive. Mr. Bennett, Thomas pressed, did Dr. Mercer specifically inform you that your low sperm motility was the primary factor affecting fertility in your marriage? Dr. Mercer suggested multiple contributing factors, Alexander replied evasively. She recommended treatments for both of us. Did you ask Dr. Mercer to alter medical records regarding your wife's fertility status? Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I asked her to ensure records accurately reflected all clinical findings. If she interpreted that as an improper request, that's unfortunate. When Thomas produced documentation of the financial retaliation against me, Alexander portrayed it as standard asset protection pending divorce proceedings. The professional sabotage was dismissed as coincidental business decisions by independent parties. As the day's testimony concluded, Judge Montgomery addressed both attorneys. I'm deeply concerned by the contradictory testimony regarding medical evidence central to this case. Dr. Mercer's testimony tomorrow will be essential. I expect complete medical documentation to be submitted without redaction. Alexander's confident expression faltered slightly at this directive. That evening, Thomas called with unexpected news. Dr. Mercer just contacted me. She was served with additional legal papers from Bennett's team this afternoon, a cease and desist regarding any discussion of Alexander's medical information claiming doctor-patient confidentiality. My heart sank. Can they do that? They're trying to prevent her from testifying about his fertility issues while allowing testimony about yours. It's a transparent attempt to control the narrative, but it could complicate tomorrow's proceedings. What about the nurse Kelly Davis? She witnessed everything. We've subpoenaed her as well, Thomas confirmed. The Bennetts can't silence everyone. As I tried to sleep that night in Rachel's spare bedroom far from the luxury townhouse I'd once shared with Alexander, I wondered what new tactics he might employ to maintain his lies. The Alexander I'd married, or thought I'd married, had seemed incapable of such calculated cruelty. But that Alexander had never existed. Tomorrow would determine whether the real Alexander Bennett, with all his wealth and connections, could successfully rewrite medical reality in a court of law. The courtroom felt even more tense on the second day of hearings. Alexander's side appeared confident, his attorney James Parker consulting casually with his client while sorting documents with manicured precision. Our table felt distinctly outmatched, just Thomas, Rachel, and me against the Bennett dynasty and their legal machinery. Judge Montgomery called the court to order promptly at 9 a.m. Today, we'll hear expert medical testimony central to the allegations in this case. Mr. Wright, call your first witness. Your Honor, the respondent calls Dr. Linda Mercer. Dr. Mercer entered looking professionally composed in a charcoal suit, though the tight line of her mouth betrayed tension. After being sworn in, she confirmed her credentials as a reproductive endocrinologist with 20 years of experience, and her role as the fertility specialist who had treated both Alexander and me. Dr. Mercer Thomas began, "Please describe your professional interactions with the Bennetts." Mr. and Mrs. Bennett consulted me approximately 18 months into their marriage regarding fertility concerns after 6 months of unsuccessful attempts to conceive. What diagnostic procedures did you perform? Standard fertility workups for both parties, hormonal panels, ultrasound evaluation of Mrs. Bennett's reproductive structures, semen analysis for Mr. Bennett, genetic screening, and other relevant tests. And what were your findings? Parker immediately objected. Your Honor, my client's medical information is protected by doctor-patient confidentiality. We have filed appropriate motions to prevent disclosure. Judge Montgomery frowned. Mr. Parker, your client opened the door to this line of questioning by placing fertility issues at the center of his petition. You can't selectively claim confidentiality for one spouse while publicly discussing the other's medical status. Nevertheless, Your Honor, specific medical details about Mr. Bennett should remain private. General testimony about the couple's fertility treatment is sufficient. I'll allow the doctor to testify about relevant medical findings for both parties, Judge Montgomery ruled firmly. The specific information directly pertaining to the fraud allegations is necessary for fair adjudication. Proceed, Dr. Mercer. Dr. Mercer took a deep breath. Mrs. Bennett's testing showed completely normal fertility parameters across all metrics. Her hormone levels, ovarian reserve, and reproductive structures were all within optimal ranges for conception. And Mr. Bennett's results, Thomas prompted. Mr. Bennett's semen analysis showed lower than normal sperm motility, which is the ability of sperm to move efficiently. This condition significantly reduces the likelihood of natural conception. Parker objected again. Your Honor, Dr. Mercer is oversimplifying complex medical findings to benefit the respondent's case. I'm stating clinical facts documented in the medical record, Dr. Mercer countered evenly. Judge Montgomery overruled the objection but instructed Dr. Mercer to provide a complete clinical picture. Based on the comprehensive testing, Dr. Mercer continued, I informed both Mr. and Mrs. Bennett that the primary fertility challenge in their case was male factor infertility due to reduced sperm motility. I recommended treatments focused primarily on addressing this issue with minimal intervention for Mrs. Bennett, since her fertility parameters were normal. How did the parties respond to this information? Thomas asked. Mrs. Bennett accepted the findings and agreed to the treatment plan. Mr. Bennett expressed disbelief and requested multiple retests. When subsequent analyses confirmed the initial findings, he became resistant to the diagnosis. What happened next? Mr. Bennett requested increasingly aggressive fertility treatments for Mrs. Bennett beyond what was medically indicated by her test results. He also minimized the significance of his own condition and was inconsistent with his recommended treatments. Did Mr. Bennett ever request alterations to medical records? Dr. Mercer's professional demeanor wavered slightly. Yes. After Mrs. Bennett moved out, Mr. Bennett requested that I modify medical records to indicate that female fertility factors were the primary issue rather than male factors. The courtroom stirred at this revelation. Alexander's face remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the table. Did you comply with this request? Thomas asked. Absolutely not. Such alteration would violate medical ethics and potentially constitute fraud. How did Mr. Bennett respond to your refusal? He became angry and made statements I interpreted as threatening to my practice. He mentioned his family's ownership of the building housing my clinic and their connections to the hospital board. Thomas nodded. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce into evidence the complete fertility records for both parties certified by Dr. Mercer as accurate and unaltered. He handed a sealed envelope to the court officer who delivered it to Judge Montgomery. Mr. Parker, any objection to these records being entered into evidence? The judge asked. Parker consulted briefly with Alexander. We maintain our objection to the public disclosure of my client's private medical information, Your Honor. Noted but overruled given the centrality of these records to the case. Judge Montgomery carefully opened the envelope and began reviewing its contents, her expression remaining neutral as she examined page after page. During cross-examination, Parker attempted to undermine Dr. Mercer's testimony by suggesting alternative interpretations of the medical findings and questioning whether she might have personal bias against Alexander. Isn't it possible, Doctor, that you've emphasized certain findings over others to support Mrs. Bennett's position in this dispute? I've reported the medical facts as documented in contemporaneous clinical notes, Dr. Mercer replied steadily. These findings were consistent across multiple tests. Yet you recommended treatments for both parties, did you not? If Mrs. Bennett had no fertility issues whatsoever, why prescribe hormonal treatments? Optimizing both partners' fertility can increase success rates, even when one partner has the primary issue. However, the treatments recommended for Mrs. Bennett were minimal compared to the interventions needed to address Mr. Bennett's condition. After Dr. Mercer stepped down, Thomas called Nurse Kelly Davis, who confirmed witnessing Alexander's request to alter medical records and his subsequent angry reaction when refused. He was shouting loud enough that patients in the waiting area could hear him, she testified. He told Dr. Mercer that Bennett's make or break medical careers in this town and that she would regret crossing him. As the medical testimony concluded, the atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted perceptibly. Judge Montgomery's scrutiny of Alexander had intensified, and even some of the court staff who had initially seemed deferential to the Bennett name now watched him with wary expressions. Thomas called our final witness a digital forensics expert who had traced the attack on my design business website and social media accounts to an IP address associated with Bennett Properties. The evidence strongly suggests that someone with administrator access to the Bennett corporate network executed these attacks, the expert testified. The techniques used were sophisticated and deliberately destructive to Mrs. Bennett's professional reputation. When all testimony concluded, Judge Montgomery addressed the court. "I've heard enough to make preliminary determinations. Based on the evidence presented, I find credible indication that Mr. Bennett has engaged in deliberate misrepresentation regarding central facts in this case, as well as potential witness intimidation and economic retaliation." Alexander's composure finally cracked. "This is outrageous!" he exclaimed, rising from his seat. "I'm Alexander Bennett. My family built this city while these people were nothing." Mr. Bennett, Judge Montgomery's voice cut through his outburst. "Control yourself or be held in contempt." Alexander subsided, but the damage was done. His mask had slipped, revealing the entitlement and rage beneath. The court orders immediate restoration of Mrs. Bennett's access to marital accounts sufficient for living expenses and business operations, pending final resolution, Judge Montgomery continued. Furthermore, Mr. Bennett is prohibited from making any further public or private statements regarding Mrs. Bennett's fertility or medical status. She held up the medical records envelope. "These certified medical documents directly contradict Mr. Bennett's central claim of fraud regarding his wife's fertility. They furthermore indicate that Mr. Bennett knowingly made false statements to this court, a serious matter I'll address separately." Judge Montgomery called a 1-hour recess before final arguments, during which Parker approached Thomas with a settlement offer. Alexander, looking shaken, waited by the courtroom doors. "Mr. Bennett is willing to provide a generous settlement in exchange for confidentiality regarding today's proceedings," Parker proposed smoothly. Thomas looked to me for direction. After all the lies, all the manipulation and public humiliation, Alexander was finally offering money to keep his own medical truth private. "No," I said firmly. "I want the judge's ruling on record. This was never about money." When court resumed, Judge Montgomery delivered her preliminary findings. "Based on the evidence presented, I find no merit in the petitioner's claim of fraud or misrepresentation regarding fertility issues. To the contrary, the evidence strongly suggests that Mr. Bennett has engaged in a pattern of misrepresentation, economic coercion, and attempted witness manipulation." She outlined interim financial arrangements, restoring my access to business funds and personal support while the divorce proceeded, and referred Alexander's behavior to the court's ethics committee for review of possible perjury charges. Additionally, she continued, given evidence of deliberate damage to Mrs. Bennett's professional reputation and business, the court orders immediate cessation of any interference with her career and clients. A forensic accountant will be appointed to assess economic damages for potential compensation. Alexander sat rigid throughout the ruling, his face a mask of controlled fury. As court adjourned, he brushed past me in the aisle and whispered, "This isn't over. No one humiliates a Bennett." But his threat lacked its former power. In exposing his lies, I had broken their spell over me. Whatever vengeance Alexander might still attempt, he could never again make me doubt my own truth. Outside, the courthouse reporters clustered on the steps. Alexander pushed past them without comment, sliding into a waiting car where his father sat stone-faced in the back seat. Margaret Bennett, who had attended both days of hearings, approached me unexpectedly before following her son. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "About the medical issues. About what Alexander did to you. I believed him." The simple admission carried no apology, but her eyes held something I'd never seen directed at me from a Bennett respect. As Thomas, Rachel, and I descended the courthouse steps, I felt lighter than I had in months. The road ahead remained challenging, rebuilding my business, finalizing the divorce, healing from the emotional wounds of Alexander's betrayal. But for the first time since leaving our marriage, I could see beyond survival to the possibility of thriving again. The truth in that envelope hadn't just vindicated me legally. It had freed me from Alexander's most insidious weapon, the doubt he'd planted about my own body, my own worth, and my own reality. 6 months after that fateful day in court, I stood in the empty space that would soon become my new design studio. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the potential I saw in every corner. After losing my original office space, predictably, the landlord had been a Bennett associate. This converted warehouse in Cambridge represented a fresh start, far from Beacon Hill's old money influence, but close enough to retain clients who'd stayed loyal through the scandal. The divorce had finalized 3 months ago with a settlement that, while far from the Bennett fortune, Alexander had initially threatened to deny me completely provided enough to restart my business and purchase a modest condo nearby. More importantly, Judge Montgomery's clear ruling on the record had restored my professional reputation and exposed Alexander's deception. The Boston Herald had run an article titled "Bennett Heirs' Fertility Fraud Claims Backfire in Court," detailing the medical evidence that contradicted Alexander's public accusations. While the more conservative Globe had covered the story more discreetly, the damage to Alexander's carefully cultivated image had been substantial. Rachel helped me measure the studio space for custom shelving, her paralegal precision useful for more than legal documents. "This place has great energy," she observed. "Much better feng shui than that stuffy Back Bay office." "No ghosts of Bennett past," I agreed. "Just possibility." My phone buzzed with a message from Thomas Wright. The forensic accountant's final report had been accepted by the court, requiring Alexander to pay substantial damages for the documented business interference. It wouldn't replace the clients lost during his smear campaign, but it would fund the studio renovation and marketing push needed to rebuild. "Justice delivered, Rachel," commented, reading over my shoulder. "How does it feel?" I considered the question carefully. Like closure, but not quite victory. "There's still so much to rebuild." "But you're rebuilding on solid ground this time," she pointed out. "No more sandcastles." She was right. Throughout my relationship with Alexander, I'd been constructing an elaborate sandcastle, beautiful but fundamentally unstable, vulnerable to the tide of his true nature. Now I was laying brick by brick on bedrock truth. The healing process hadn't been linear. There were still mornings I woke reaching for Alexander before remembering everything. Nights when I questioned whether I could have recognized the warning signs earlier or handled things differently. Sessions with my therapist had helped me understand the insidious nature of emotional abuse, how it escalates gradually, normalizing abnormal behavior until the extraordinary seems ordinary. The ability to distort someone's reality is the ultimate form of control, Dr. Harper had explained during one particularly difficult session. Alexander gaslighting you about your own body represented the most intimate form of that manipulation. Working through those realizations had been painful but necessary. I'd begun keeping a journal documenting my experiences both as therapy and potentially as the foundation for a resource to help others recognize patterns of emotional manipulation in their own relationships. A week after signing the lease on my new studio, I bumped into Dr. Linda Mercer at a cafe near the hospital district. She recognized me immediately, her professional reserve softening into a genuine smile. "Mrs. Reynolds," she greeted me using my reclaimed maiden name. "You look well." "Please, it's Sophia," I replied. "And thank you for everything. Your testimony made all the difference." She hesitated, then asked if she could join me. Over coffee, she shared how Alexander's father had attempted to pressure the hospital board regarding her privileges after the court case, only to be rebuffed by colleagues who respected her professional integrity. "The Bennetts aren't accustomed to losing," she observed, "but even their influence has limits when confronted with documented facts." It took me too long to realize that I admitted. I believed Alexander's version of reality for so long, even when it contradicted my own experience. "That's the insidious nature of gaslighting," Dr. Mercer replied, "especially when it comes from someone you love and trust." She hesitated before adding, "Several patients have approached me recently after recognizing similar patterns in their own relationships. Your stand against Alexander Bennett has had wider impact than you might realize." Her words stayed with me, sparking an idea that grew over the following weeks. Beyond rebuilding my design business, perhaps there was another way to transform my painful experience into something meaningful. Rachel connected me with a domestic violence resource center looking to renovate their counseling spaces and administrative offices. When I offered my services pro bono, their director Emily was initially hesitant. "We can't pay much," she warned during our first meeting. "I'm not looking for payment," I explained. "I've experienced emotional abuse firsthand. Creating a healing environment for others facing similar situations would be meaningful to me." The project became a labor of healing, designing spaces that felt simultaneously safe and empowering. Soothing colors and comfortable furnishings balanced with expansive windows and dynamic layouts. As I worked with the staff to understand their clients' needs, I shared parts of my own story, finding unexpected catharsis in the telling. News about Alexander came sporadically, mostly through business publications rather than personal connections. Bennett Properties had lost a major development contract after a prominent female executive refused to work with Alexander following the publicity around our divorce. His father had reportedly stepped back into a more active leadership role, limiting Alexander's public responsibilities. The most surprising update came from Margaret Bennett, who sent a brief, handwritten note on monogrammed stationery. "Your design of the Children's Hospital Foundation Gala was truly exceptional. Should you ever consider working with the foundation again, several board members would welcome your return." Not quite an apology, but a significant gesture from a woman who had testified against me in court. I declined politely. Some bridges once burned weren't worth rebuilding, even with the Bennett name attached. Nearly a year after leaving Alexander, I hosted the grand opening of my new studio, renamed Reynolds Design Collective, to emphasize the collaborative approach I'd adopted, bringing in junior designers whose talent exceeded their connections. The event drew both loyal clients and new prospects, including several who'd canceled projects during Alexander's campaign against me. "Your work speaks for itself," one returned client told me. "The Bennett drama actually made me more interested in working with a designer who'd shown such resilience." The Boston Business Journal ran a profile titled "Rising from Ashes: How Sophia Reynolds Rebuilt After Bennett Divorce." The article focused primarily on my design, philosophy, and business approach, mentioning the divorce only as context for the studio's rebirth. The journalist had respected my request to emphasize my work rather than my personal trauma, another small victory in reclaiming my narrative. The evening after the article published, I received an unexpected email from Nurse Kelly Davis, who had testified about Alexander's behavior at the fertility clinic. She was considering speaking out about other instances of medical bullying she'd witnessed from wealthy patients, inspired partly by my refusal to be silenced. "Standing up to power has consequences," she wrote, "but watching you rebuild has given me courage." I thought often about Alexander's final courtroom threat. This isn't over waiting for the next attack. But perhaps the most painful realization for someone with his ego was that it was indeed over. Life had continued. I had continued. His power to define my reality had ended the moment Judge Montgomery opened that envelope. The lessons learned came at tremendous cost, emotional, financial, professional. Yet they had forged a version of myself with clearer boundaries, sharper instincts, and deeper compassion both for others and myself. I would never say the experience made me stronger, that framing romanticizes trauma in unhelpful ways, but it had made me more authentic. The woman who once designed her life to accommodate Alexander Bennett's expectations now created spaces that reflected her own values for clients who appreciated the difference. Some evenings, walking through my modest but light-filled condo or working late in my studio, I still experienced moments of wistfulness for the luxury and ease of my married life. The material comforts had been real, even if the relationship beneath them had been built on illusion. But those moments past, quickly replaced by appreciation for the genuine freedom I'd reclaimed. The truth about fertility that Alexander had so desperately tried to suppress hadn't just been about medical reality, it had exposed the fundamental dishonesty at his core. In trying to preserve his ego and family image, he had revealed his true character more completely than any medical record could have. As for me, I remained open to the possibility of having children someday on my own terms and timeline. The medical records confirming my normal fertility had liberated me not just from Alexander's lies, but from the artificial deadline his family had imposed on my reproductive choices. Whether through partnership, adoption, or single parenthood, that decision would now be truly mine. Life after Alexander wasn't perfect. Rebuilding took longer than destroying. Trust came harder than before. But each day brought new evidence that authenticity, however messy and imperfect, created foundations far stronger than any facade, no matter how beautifully designed. The envelope Judge Montgomery opened hadn't just contained medical facts, it had released me from a gilded cage I hadn't fully recognized until I was free. And that freedom, hard-won and sometimes terrifying, was worth every moment of the fight to reclaim it. So what about you? Have you ever had to rebuild after someone tried to make you doubt your own reality? Has standing up for your truth cost you relationships or opportunities? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found value in mine, please consider subscribing and sharing this video with someone who might need to hear that they're not crazy, they're not alone, and the truth really does have power to set us free. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, no one else gets to define your worth or rewrite your reality. Your truth matters, and so do you.